Nearly 50 years have passed since Elvis Presley's death. But the walls of Graceland still keep their secrets. In this iconic mansion in Memphis, Elvis had a private room that only a few close friends could enter. The door was always locked, the windows kept shut, and sounds from inside disturbed other Graceland staff members. Elvis would stay in that room for hours alone, sometimes entering at midnight and not coming out until morning. So what was in that room? Why did Elvis keep it so secret? And most importantly, why were the items found in that room hastily removed after his death? Throughout this video, we'll discover one of Elvis's biggest secrets. Before we dive deeper into this mystery, I want to ask you something. If you're fascinated by the hidden stories behind the legends, the untold truth that shaped Elvis Presley's life, then you're in the right place. This channel brings you Elvis stories with details you won't find anywhere else. Hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear will change how you see the king of rock and roll forever. Graceland's heart and hidden corner. It was 1957. When Elvis Presley bought this beautiful mansion south of Memphis at 22 years old, he wasn't just looking for a house. He was looking for a sanctuary. Graceland was meant to be his own paradise, away from the noise of the world. 14 rooms, expansive gardens, and a space where he could stay outside the chaos created by fame. But inside Graceland, there was another room that nobody knew about. This room would eventually become Elvis's most intimate refuge. In the early years, Graceland was full of joy. Elvis lived there with his mother Gladys, and the mansion was constantly filled with guests, musicians, and friends. Everyone knows the Jungle Room, Elvis's famous room full of exotic furniture surrounded by greenery. Everyone knows the billiards room, with its ceiling covered in hundreds of fabric pieces hanging on the walls. But on the second floor, right next to Elvis's bedroom, there was a small door. This door looked so plain that most people thought it was a closet door. Yet behind that door, the deepest corners of Elvis's soul were hidden. Nancy Rooks worked at Graceland as Elvis's personal cook. She worked in that house for years and had the chance to know Elvis closely. In an interview, Nancy said, "That room's door was always closed. Elvis would sometimes go in there in the middle of the night and wouldn't come out until morning. When we were preparing breakfast in the kitchen, we'd see Elvis coming out of that room and walking down the stairs. His eyes were always tired, always distant. It was like he was going to and coming from another world in that room." What Nancy described had always been a subject of curiosity among Graceland's staff. But nobody dared to enter that room. So what was Elvis doing in that room? Why did he come out so exhausted in the mornings? And most importantly, what exactly was inside that room? The only person Elvis let in. By 1968, Elvis's life had undergone major changes. He had married Priscilla, his daughter Lisa Marie had been born, and he was stepping into a new era in his career. But that secret room continued to hold the same place in Elvis's life. Some even said Elvis didn't show Priscilla that room. But there was one person Elvis opened that room's door to. That person was Red West, Elvis's childhood friend and closest confidant. Red West had grown up with Elvis, served as his bodyguard, friend, and was one of the few people he trusted. One night, Elvis and Red were alone in the mansion. Elvis told Red, "Come, I'll show you something," and took him upstairs. Years later, when Red recounted this moment in a documentary, his eyes filled with tears. "When Elvis took me to that room, I didn't know what I'd see. When he opened the door, what I saw inside shocked me. The room was small but covered on all sides with photographs, letters, newspapers. Some photos were from Elvis's childhood, some from his mother's funeral. There was a picture hanging on the wall, said to be of Elvis's twin brother, Jesse Garon. Elvis turned to me and said, "This is my past, Red. This is my pain." What Red described showed that the room wasn't just storage. This room was a reflection of Elvis's inner world. Among the photos hanging on the walls were pictures of Elvis's mother, Gladys. Gladys had died of a heart attack in 1958, when Elvis was only 23. This death had deeply shaken Elvis, and he never fully recovered. In that room, letters Gladys had written to Elvis, items she had used, and even perfume bottles were kept. Elvis would sometimes enter that room, spray his mother's perfume, and sit there for hours. But the room didn't only contain items belonging to his mother. According to Red West, in one corner were documents, medals, and uniforms from Elvis's military service. Elvis had served in the military in Germany between 1958 and 1960, and that period was one of the most difficult years of his life. His mother had died, his career had stalled, and he felt very alone. But in Germany, he had met a girl, Priscilla Beaulieu. At that time, Priscilla was only 14 years old, and when Elvis first saw her, he thought he had met the love of his life. In that room were also the first letters Priscilla had written to Elvis, lines full of love, written in a young girl's childish handwriting. But what else was in the room? Why did Elvis carefully preserve these items? And most importantly, was Priscilla aware of this room's existence? Priscilla and the room's mystery. Priscilla Presley had moved to Graceland after marrying Elvis. As she explored every corner of the mansion, it was impossible for her not to notice that secret room. But Elvis never told her anything about it. In her own memoirs, Priscilla mentioned this room saying, "There was a room in Graceland whose door was always closed. Elvis would never tell me anything about it. When I asked once, he just said, 'That's my private space. Nobody can go in there.' I didn't insist further. I respected Elvis's own world." But one night, Priscilla succumbed to her curiosity. Elvis wasn't home. He was on a concert tour, and only a few staff members were at Graceland. Priscilla quietly went upstairs at midnight and stood in front of that door. The door was locked, but Priscilla managed to unlock it by playing with Elvis's key ring. When she slowly pushed the door, a dark room appeared. When she turned on the light, what she saw surprised her greatly. The room really was filled with photographs, letters, and personal items. But something else caught Priscilla's attention. A large family tree hanging on the wall. This tree showed the entire history of Elvis's family, and at the top was written the name of Elvis's twin brother, Jesse Garon. Jesse Garon was Elvis's twin brother who had died at birth. Throughout his life, Elvis carried Jesse's ghost. He always felt half, as if he had a missing piece. This room was where Elvis kept his connection with Jesse alive. On the wall hung a baby photo assumed to be Jesse. Of course, there were actually no photos of Jesse because he died immediately after birth. But Elvis believed that photo represented Jesse. When Priscilla left the room that night, she felt she understood Elvis's inner world a little better. But she never entered that room again, and never told Elvis she had been there that night. Elvis's connection to this room wasn't just about the past. It was also a place where he could escape the pressure brought by fame. In the 1960s and 70s, Elvis was one of the most famous people in the world. Everywhere he went, he was surrounded by fans. Every step was photographed. Every word was written down. Under this pressure, Elvis needed to have a space of his own. And that room served exactly this function. Elvis would sit there for hours, listening to music, reading books, and most importantly, thinking. But was Elvis just thinking in this room? Or were other things happening too? Graceland staff said the sounds coming from that room were sometimes very strange. What were they hearing? Sounds heard in the night silence. Charlie Hodge, Graceland's night watchman, worked alongside Elvis for years. In an interview, Charlie shared very striking details about that secret room. During my night shift, around 2 or 3 o'clock, sounds would come from upstairs. Sometimes I'd hear Elvis talking, but nobody was with him. Once, I went up the stairs and listened carefully. Elvis was speaking loudly inside the room, but as if he was having a dialogue with someone. He'd say something, then pause as if waiting for an answer, leaving silence. Then he'd start talking again. It was very eerie, but also very sad. Elvis was so lonely that at night he was talking with imaginary people. What Charlie described gave important clues about Elvis's state of mind in that room. In that room, Elvis wasn't just confronting physical items, but also the ghosts of his past. He was talking with his mother, calling out to his twin brother Jesse, and sometimes just crying silently. Graceland staff would see in the mornings when Elvis came out of that room that his eyes were bright red, with tear marks on his face. But nobody dared ask anything, because that room was Elvis's sacred space, and what happened there belonged only to him. By 1970, Elvis's life had become much more complicated. He had divorced Priscilla, couldn't see his daughter Lisa Marie often, and was going through a difficult period in his career. The Las Vegas concerts were exhausting, drug use was increasing, and his health was gradually deteriorating. During this period, that secret room became even more important to Elvis. It was no longer just a refuge, but also a therapy room. During the hours Elvis spent there, he reviewed his life, thought about his mistakes, and worried about his future. Elvis's doctor, George Nicopolis, known to everyone as Dr. Nick, was concerned about Elvis's mental health. Once he asked Elvis about that room, and Elvis answered, "That room is a time machine for me. When I go in there, I go back to the past. I talk with my mother, I see Jesse, and I feel like a child again. Being there gives me peace because there nobody expects me to be Elvis Presley. There I'm just Elvis Aaron Presley, a simple boy." When Dr. Nick heard this answer, he understood how lonely and lost Elvis felt. But he didn't know what to do to help him. Elvis's dependency on this room was increasing. But what else was hidden in the room? And most importantly, why were the items found in that room after Elvis's death hastily removed? The room's darkest secret. By the end of 1976, Elvis's health had seriously deteriorated. His weight had increased, drug use had gotten out of control, and his stage performances weren't as energetic as before. But Elvis still continued to enter that room. In fact, some nights, he'd stay there until morning and fall asleep. Graceland's staff would find him sleeping on the floor inside that room in the mornings. Elvis's girlfriend Ginger Alden watched the situation with great concern. Once, Ginger told Elvis, "This room is making you sick. Stop going there." But Elvis only replied, "You don't understand it. That place is very important to me." Inside the room, new items had started accumulating over time. Empty boxes of Elvis's prescription drugs, half-drunk whiskey bottles, and notes written haphazardly on papers. These notes reflected Elvis's mental state. Some notes said, "Why me?" And some had sentences like, "Jesse, forgive me." On some papers were song lyrics, but never completed, half-finished lyrics. It was clear that in that room, Elvis was struggling not just with his memories, but also with his own internal conflicts. By August of 1977, Elvis's final days were approaching. On the morning of August 16th, when Ginger Alden found Elvis motionless in the bathroom, panic began at Graceland. An ambulance was called, police came, and the mansion quickly filled with chaos. But right in the middle of this chaos, something strange happened. A few people from Elvis's close circle rushed to that secret room and opened the door. When they entered, they quickly began gathering some items from the room. Some documents, some photos, and some personal notes were hastily put into bags and removed from the mansion. This hasty cleaning operation had begun before Elvis's body had even returned from the hospital. But why? Because in that room were very private documents that Elvis didn't want the public to know about. Among these were records related to Elvis's drug use, correspondence with doctors, and most importantly, some personal confessions. Elvis had written the darkest moments of his life in a diary he kept in that room. How he felt, what pains he experienced, and even that he sometimes thought about dying. If this diary were leaked to the press, it could seriously damage Elvis's legacy. So where did that diary go? And what happened to the other items in the room? Did Elvis's family try to keep these secrets forever? Where the secrets were buried? In the days after Elvis's death, Graceland fell into silence. The mansion was closed to fan visits, and only family members and very close friends could enter. During this period, that secret room was completely emptied. Photos on the walls were taken down, letters were collected, and all personal items were put into boxes. Some sources claim that some of these items were moved to Graceland's basement, while others were burned. Elvis's family didn't want the secrets inside that room to get out because they wanted to protect Elvis's memory. But one thing didn't escape notice. One of Elvis's closest friends hid something from that room. This person took a few pages from the diary Elvis had written and took them with him. For years, he didn't show those pages to anyone. But in 1990, he gave them to a writer. This writer was preparing a biography about Elvis's life, and those pages formed the most striking sections of the book. On those pages, Elvis wrote, "Every night when I enter that room, I feel better. But at the same time, I get worse, because what I see there is the ghost of my past. I'm sad about my mother leaving. I'm sad that Jesse never lived. And I'm sad for myself because I'm lost too." These lines showed Elvis's inner world very clearly. That room wasn't just storage. It was a part of Elvis's soul. Every minute he spent there was an experience that both comforted and pained him. In that room, Elvis confronted his past, admitted his mistakes, and sometimes hoped he could forgive himself. But he never found true peace because the past kept pulling him back. In 1992, Graceland opened to the public as a museum. Millions of fans came to visit this iconic mansion where Elvis had lived. But during tours, that secret room was never shown. The second floor was kept closed to the public, and all rooms in that section, including Elvis's bedroom, were hidden from visitors. When Graceland guides received questions about this, they always gave the same answer. The second floor was Elvis's private area, and his family wants to keep it private. But some former staff members claimed that the room was still there and its interior was still full of some items. A former Graceland staff member, someone who didn't want to give their name, said, "That room is still there. Its door is locked and only a few people can go inside. Some family members enter that room once a year to remember Elvis. But nobody knows what's inside the room because it's now completely forbidden." So what's in that room today? Why does Elvis's family keep it so secret? And perhaps the most important question, will that room's secrets one day be revealed? Elvis's legacy and the room's importance. When Elvis Presley lost his life in 1977, he was only 42 years old. He left behind a tremendous musical legacy, millions of fans, and countless memories. But at the same time, he also left unsolved mysteries. That secret room was the most concrete indicator of these mysteries, because there were items hiding Elvis's deepest emotions, his darkest moments, and his most fragile aspects. These items showed that Elvis wasn't just a superstar, but also very much human. Elvis's daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, rarely spoke about her father's room. But in an interview, she said, "My father's room was very special to him. When I was little, I wanted to go into that room, but my father would never allow it. Only once, he took me inside, and we looked at the photos on the wall. He showed me my grandmother Gladys's photo and said, 'Look, this is your grandmother. She loved you very much.' At that moment, I saw so much pain in my father's eyes. It was as if that room was like a home for his suffering." Lisa Marie's memory shows how important that room was to Elvis. In that room, Elvis kept not just his items, but also his emotions. Being there both gave him relief and caused him pain, because confronting the past is never easy, especially a past full of losses. Today, when Elvis's fans visit Graceland, they're unaware of that secret room's existence. Tours only cover the ground floor and some special areas. But some Elvis enthusiasts do research to learn that room's secrets. On the internet, there are countless theories and speculations about that room. Some claim that Elvis's secret diaries still sit inside the room. Others say the room has been emptied and is now just an empty room. But the truth is a secret known only by Elvis's family and very close circle. Elvis's room continues to be one of the most mysterious aspects of his life. That room reminds us that Elvis wasn't just a famous singer, but also a suffering, lonely person struggling with his past. Elvis's music reflects his happiness and passion. But that room shows his pain and fragility. When the two come together, we see Elvis's true human portrait. So should we, as Elvis fans, want to know this hidden side of him? Or should we only remember Elvis as the bright star on stage? Conclusion: Elvis's true face. Elvis Presley went down in history as the king of rock and roll. His music influenced generations and is still listened to by millions of people. But Elvis's real story isn't just about his performances on stage. His real story is hidden in that secret room at Graceland. There's a man's struggle to confront his past, his pains, and his losses. There lies the truth that Elvis wasn't just a famous singer, but also a very sensitive and fragile person. That room hid the reality behind the image Elvis showed the world. Elvis, who smiled, sang, and excited his fans when he took the stage, transformed into a completely different person when he entered that room. There, he removed his mask and was left alone with his true emotions. This transformation shows what a heavy burden Elvis carried. Fame, money, and renown hadn't brought him inner peace. On the contrary, They had made him even more lonely and unable to escape his past's pains. Graceland's secret room still stands there today. Its door locked, its windows closed, and its secrets preserved. Perhaps one day, Elvis's family will decide to open that room's doors and share the items inside with the world. Then we'll learn Elvis's true story completely. But perhaps it's better that some secrets remain kept, because those secrets belong to Elvis's most private moments, and respecting his memory means protecting those secrets. Elvis's music made him immortal, but that secret room reminds us of his humanity. Elvis Presley wasn't just a legend, he was also a human being. And like all humans, he had his pains, his losses, and his secret world. That room at Graceland is the strongest proof of this truth. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: every person has a room they don't show to others. Elvis's room was a physical space, but our rooms are hidden in our minds, in our hearts. And perhaps Elvis's story teaches us this: confronting those rooms, though painful, is the only way to find true peace. In conclusion, Graceland's secret room wasn't just a room. It was a refuge where Elvis Presley's soul, his memories, and his pains were kept. That room became both an escape and a prison for him. Elvis tried to confront his past there, but could never truly make peace with it. And after his death, that room's secrets were hastily hidden because the world wanted to remember Elvis only as a bright star. But the truth is, Elvis's greatest struggle was off stage, in that dark room at Graceland. And perhaps his legacy should be remembered not just for his music, but also for this human story.